Fairy tales, enchanting stories of wonder and magic, or disturbing tales with a dark, hidden truth? That's what we're supposed to find out. Join us as we explore the fascinating history and psychology of fairy tales and uncover the unsettling truth behind these beloved legends. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more insights on historical events and mythology. Let's get started. Long before social media, smartphones, and Wi-Fi, humans told stories to entertain themselves. These stories often contained magical elements, mythical creatures, and mystical lands that captured the listeners' imaginations. But why have these tales existed for so many centuries, even in an age of instant gratification? The answer lies in the power of storytelling. Fairy tales were originally passed down through oral traditions from generation to generation, allowing them to evolve and adapt over time. Imagine sitting by a fireplace, surrounded by family and friends, and a wise elder weaves a tale of wonder and adventure. This is the magic of storytelling, and that is what keeps fairy tales alive. In the 19th century, the Brothers Grimm famously collected and published hundreds of fairy tales, popularizing them throughout Europe and beyond. But did you know that different cultures have their own versions of these tales? From the ancient Indian Panchanatrara to the Icelandic Hrudafrukt, these stories reflect the unique values and beliefs of their respective cultures. Fairy tales have always been a reflection of society's hopes and fears, its dreams and nightmares. But these tales are not just for children. Adults, too, can find meaning and wisdom in the pages of a fairy tale. And the evolution of fairy tales over time has led to different adaptations, reflecting changes in cultural attitudes and values. For example, let's compare the original Beauty and the Beast tale to the Disney remake. The Grimm tale has a kind-hearted girl with two selfish sisters who get granted wishes. Their father, a widower merchant, raised them. Beauty's father took a rose from a palace garden and made a deal with a hideous beast who demanded one of his daughters. Beauty goes to the palace and lives with the beast for months, and they fall in love. The Disney version adapts for children by taking objects and leaving out the evil sister's plan. Both versions are similar, with a few changes made for a less violent and scary beast. But here's where it gets interesting. The story of two little girls, one who wore a red cap and the other who carried a basket of goodies for her grandma. We all know their stories, Little Red Cap by the Grimm brothers and Little Red Riding Hood by Charles Perrault. But did you know that these tales have much darker origins than the sanitized versions we know today? In the original versions, Little Red is not just a sweet, innocent girl, but rather a symbol of seduction and temptation. The wolf represents a predatory figure that seeks to devour her, both literally and figuratively. The stories are filled with violence, sexual undertones, and moral ambiguity. But over time, these elements were toned down or removed altogether to make the tales more suitable for children. So, what are the similarities and differences between the two versions? Well, both stories feature a little girl who encounters a wolf in the woods and ends up in danger. However, Perrault's version has a more moralistic ending, with the little girl being punished for her naivety. But the Grimm brothers' version has a more ambiguous ending, with Little Red and her grandmother being devoured by the wolf, only to be rescued by a huntsman who cuts open the wolf's stomach. Yikes! These elements may be disturbing, but they reflect the values and ideas of their times. However, as cultural attitudes and values shift, so do fairy tales. Modern adaptations of Little Red Riding Hood often portray the girl as a strong, empowered character who outwits the wolf instead of being a passive victim. Furthermore, some adaptations have addressed problematic elements of classic fairy tales, such as gender roles and racial stereotypes. In The True Story of the Three Little Pigs, the story is told from the perspective of the wolf, challenging the idea of good versus evil. But what about the psychological impact of fairy tales on young minds? Research has shown that exposure to fairy tales can have both positive and negative effects on children. There was a time when a little boy loved nothing more than to hear his mother read him fairy tales before bed. He would listen in awe as she spun tales of enchanted forests, talking animals, and brave heroes. Little did he know, these stories were doing more than just entertaining him. They were shaping his imagination, developing his empathy, and honing his critical thinking skills. On the one hand, these tales provide fertile ground for imagination and creativity, allowing children to explore new worlds and develop their cognitive abilities. On the other hand, they can perpetuate harmful stereotypes and unrealistic expectations, particularly when it comes to gender roles. On the more positive side, fairy tales can help children develop empathy by exposing them to diverse characters and situations. They can also improve critical thinking skills by encouraging children to think critically about the actions and motives of characters. However, they can also have negative effects, particularly when they reinforce stereotypes or promote unrealistic expectations about love and relationships. For example, the damsel in distress story can perpetuate the idea that women are helpless and in need of a male savior. Similarly, the idea of love at first sight can portray far-fetched ideas about relationships and undermine the importance of mutual respect and communication. So, what are the parents supposed to do? Well, the key is to approach fairy tales with a critical eye, encouraging children to think critically about the messages they contain. It is also important to seek out diverse and inclusive fairy tales that reflect a variety of perspectives and experiences. Now, after taking a closer look, it becomes clear that the fairy tales we grew up with are not as innocent and magical as they may seem. Some of them have messages hidden beneath the surface. Let's start with the gender stereotypes. From Sleeping Beauty to Snow White, classic fairy tales often show women as helpless damsels in distress, waiting for a prince to rescue them. And don't even get me started on the wicked stepmothers and evil queens, who are vilified solely for their ambition and desire for power. These messages are harmful and perpetuate damaging gender roles that can affect children's beliefs about themselves and others. But it's not just gender stereotypes that fairy tales promote. Violence is also a common theme. The Grimm's version of Cinderella includes stepsisters cutting off their toes to fit into a glass slipper. And in Hansel and Gretel, a witch who wanted to cook and eat children was later burned alive in an oven. And the stepmother in Snow White, who orders the huntsman to kill the young girl. These stories glorify violence and can desensitize children to its real-life consequences. But here's the thing, fairy tales aren't just entertainment. They've been used throughout history to maintain dominant power structures. Kings and queens would commission fairy tales to instill obedience and loyalty in their subjects. And some modern adaptations have attempted to subvert these structures by giving power to marginalized groups and promoting messages of inclusivity and diversity. One example of this is Ella Enchanted, a retelling of Cinderella in which the protagonist is cursed with obedience and must learn to break free from societal expectations. Another example is The Paper Bag Princess, in which a princess rescues her prince from a dragon, only to realize he's not worth her time. These stories offer a new perspective and encourage critical thinking about the messages we absorb from fairy tales. So what's the takeaway here? While they can be magical and entertaining, fairy tales can also perpetuate harmful messages that shape how we view the world around us. It's up to us to critically examine these stories and think about the messages that we're absorbing. So go ahead and enjoy your favorite fairy tales, but remember to think critically about what they're really saying. Because they are not just simple bedtime stories, but a complex web of messages that shape the values and attitudes of our future generation. So, what do you think? Are fairy tales harmless fun, or are they contributing to harmful stereotypes and unrealistic expectations? We want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking content.